listen, not only is the price of gas too damn high, but the price of living is becoming too damn high. I can't keep up with the market anymore. And I was telling the place where our studio is at.
Yeah, they don't deserve free promotion. The place is what I call it.
For legal reasons too. But I said, I'm going to write a scathing Yelp review. Scathing. And good luck getting any and I'm going to blow you out on a podcast. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe that was the wrong verbiage. But I was so livid. And I said, I'm on a very popular podcast. Literally tens of people are going to hear this scathing review about how I was so poorly mistreated, and good goddamn luck trying to get an Australian in this son of a bitch after that.
Oh man,
I'm heated.
What did they say? Did that get through to them? Did that break through?
I saw a little quiver in their lips, so I think they knew they might have bitten off a little more than they could chew.
That's good. I'm very happy.
I'm very chewable.
But this is also a teachable moment for a
chewable, teachable moment.
Listeners, but more importantly, the viewers, is that as you know, there is a close relationship, if not a Venn diagram that is a circle, between what comprises our studio and what comprises David's personal residence. So if this situation is not redeemable in terms of David's current living arrangement, we will have to move the studio to the new place. And that may eliminate our video capabilities for a week or two. And so we apologize in advance. We're hoping that it resolves itself and we stay in the current place and everything's fine.
Or we could just join a commune. Let's just make a commune, David.
There you go.
We'll have to get 5 different revenue streams to come together to live in one house down here.
Yeah, that's what it takes these days in South Florida.
But we're all having to get used to trimming back the fat on how we exist, right?
Because listen, as we talked about on a few episodes ago, the whole reason that we're even having this problem is because we have a bad attitude about the economy.
And we just give it too much attitude. We're like a moody teenager, like, fuck you, mom. I mean, economy.
So we're grounded by, shooting our rents through the roof. So if that happens...
That is fucked up.
If that happens...
I'll show you, you little turd.
We apologize in advance for the lack of video. We will still, because the show always goes on here at WMD Podcast, we will still record episodes, but they'll be audio only. You'll still be able to get them on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. It'll just be the logo like we used to have before we had video capability. So we just wanted to let you know that ahead of time.
But we're going to do our damnedest to make sure that our not so pretty faces are still on the YouTube channel for you
as much as possible. So with that being said, today's topics, just run through them real quick and then we'll hit them on the other side of the jump in. In the Culture Corner, we're talking about the government and or global regime kind of frogging the pot, boiling you into accepting a lower standard of living. In the Epstein didn't kill himself segment, we're talking about the very Orwellian changing of the definition of recession because, hey, listen.
If you don't call it, it's not it.
Who among us when we were in grade school got an F and said, Mom, F stands for fantastic. I did great. Okay? Who among us has not done that, David?
I think I did that one too many times, actually.
Then Mom started calling the teachers. And
I think they started calling bullshit. I'm pretty sure that's not the grading scale.
So the White House wants you to know that regardless of your piss poor performance, if you change the definition of words, you didn't really do as bad as you thought you did.
Listen, every monster has always been thwarted by the child that hides under the blanket and just doesn't look. It's like, shit! Where do all these children go?
And then the last of the main topic of the episode is the PACT Act, P-A-C-T Act.
Don't do that to me.
Which is...
I'm not going to be able to do that.
Which is, the catchy headline is that it's supposed to help veterans that were harmed by being in theaters of war, specifically burn pits, giving them cancer and all sorts of other autoimmune ailments. And Jon Stewart has some thoughts on it. We have some thoughts on it. His Republican opponents have some thoughts on it. But what we really think is there's a key point about that whole story that is being missed. And that's what we're going to discuss on this episode. So with that being said, David, Are you ready to hit the people with some knowledge?
Please do.
Welcome to Weapons of Immune Destruction Podcast, episode 105, which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/105. You can find it on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Immune Destruction. You can find it on the video platforms, YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. And then you can also link up with us on our other socials, join all of the conversations that we're having on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Now, David.
Yes.
Jumping into the culture corner, this is, I don't think we're stretching the word culture too far to say that they're trying to shift the culture in a very real sense. And what I mean by they is, the global power elites, and whether it be under the catch-all term of globalism or whether it be in the context of a very few
The Kaiser von
people.
Schwab.
Yeah.
They will have nothing and they'll be happier. They will eat bugs and pick the crickets out of the teas.
These kind of international bodies, whether it be the World Economic Forum or in healthcare, whether it be WHO, and all of these kind of pushes to have these international organizations controlled by a very small handful, and often the same types or very closely connected people, making all of the decisions in your life, all the way down to the personal level of what to put in your body, and out to the macro level of what you're allowed to have and enjoy in the global economy. And the target of this new group of people this week was air conditioners. And I saw a funny meme. So the classic, it has the AR-15 and it says "come and take it" under it. Somebody put a window AC unit and said
over my dead body. Well,
So-
I just want to jump in and say, how many Bond films do we have to go down, or do we have to record and watch before we realize that you can't trust a bald German? If they're bald and they have this accent, do not let them run anything. Don't even let them manage a McDonald's. They'll start world domination from the McDonald's. I guarantee you that.
By the way, we can say that, okay? Because I'm half German. David, you're half or 3/4?
I'm German. We're mutts, but we're predominantly German.
Yeah, so we can say that. We can say whatever we want.
We identify as German.
That's how like the
I woke up today and
Olympics
identified
go,
as German. We'll get to that later too.
So what we have just kind of, really hitting home about this point about going after the AC is we have an opinion piece. And again, we always like to be fair and point out that although we're comparing opinion pieces across a singular platform, which looks to be hypocritical because they contradict each other, we still want to be fair and say, yes, these are opinion pieces. And CNN is publishing opinion pieces from people that could have, shocker, different opinions. But it's just rather important within the broader narrative of CNN being a mouthpiece for the regime, and whether that's in the United States or in the global regime of give these 5 people control over every aspect of your lives, is these contradictions should not go unnoticed by the average reader, the person who listens and watches this podcast. But this week we have an article from a Paul Hakanos, and you'll never guess, he does have hair, but he's a German. So Paul Hakanos,
He's 50% there. We got our eyes on you, buddy.
So Paul Hakanos had a opinion piece published on CNN on Monday of this week, July 22nd, 2022, where he's basically lambasting Americans for their overdependence, their overuse on air conditioning units, because that's not the standard in Europe. And basically, he's, in not so subtle way, sneering down his nose at you evil, dirty, fossil fuel consuming Americans. You need to get like us Europeans.
Has never seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail. This is a temperate zone. The coconut's tropical. Like, if you live in a tropical area, you're gonna need AC because your balls are gonna hang down to the ground because it's so goddamn hot. Whereas like in Ireland, it might get up to 80 degrees like once or twice. It changes. Latitudes change. So does the weather. Like there's certain places that don't need AC. There are other places that do. Tell an Arizonan, is that the right one? Arizonian, that they don't need AC. You're in the desert, you greedy fucking American.
Well, what I'll say Hakanos is probably doing when he conceptualizes America in his brain, it's probably like the Northeast and California.
The coasts.
Well, not even all the way down the coast. Like, okay, maybe Florida just because it is so populated that you can't completely ignore it. But he's not thinking of middle America or anybody below.
Who does?
Anybody, below the old-fashioned Mason-Dixon line. So like he's not thinking of Arizona, Nevada.
So he's racist.
Maybe Texas to an extent. Yeah, he hates white Southerners.
What a disgusting, deplorable.
So he's thinking, in his mind's eye, he's thinking, yeah, America is on the same latitude as we are. It's also a temperate zone, which again might be true of the Northeast United States, not exactly true of tropical Florida. But
yeah, Antarctica. You pussies. You don't need fire.
Don't ask Paul to consider the vast expanse of America in different climates and all that kind of stuff. Versus his experience in Germany, which is much, much smaller.
Watch his head explode when you tell him that if you go further south from the equator, it gets colder too.
Oh, snap.
Holy crap. He's going to shit himself.
So that's the opinion piece that served as kind of the jumping off point for this topic. And again, the reason why this is the culture corner is because these international organizations, whether it be the World Economic Forum, WHO, or the United States government, as basically being the military arm that enforces all of these international measures, these pushing people to accept a lower standard of living. That's the first thing that popped into David and I's head when we read this. It's like, wow, dude, you're coming for the AC in the middle of the summer. I'm not even going to do it the credit of calling it this massive heat wave that the climate catastrophists want you to think it is. But you come out with this opinion piece in the middle of the summer because you might think you're slick with your room temperature IQ average reader at CNN. But David and I and the listeners and viewers of Weapons of Mass Destruction are a little bit a step ahead of you. And we can see that exactly what you're trying to do is push the culture to accept a lower standard of living.
Well, just like the World Economic Forum said, you'll have nothing and like it. Like, that implies that somebody's going to own it. We're going to be renting everything. Somebody owns that shit. So
right.
And guess what? They're probably going to have AC.
Right.
They're going to have AC.
And I mean,
not so much.
You bring up a very good point, and I'm going to tie this back to a Milton Friedman. So he used to do these, I don't know if a symposium or just a conference called Free to Choose. And he would answer questions from the crowd about capitalism versus socialism, yada, yada, yada. And one person asked the question about, what do you think about the poverty that exists in capitalist societies? And Friedman's quote was, or I'm paraphrasing, said something to the effect of, can you name any society on earth where poverty has been eradicated? And then he goes on to talk about the socialist, experiments in Russia and Cuba, et cetera, that not only was poverty not eradicated, there was more of it because, don't get it twisted, the resources of the economy are still there. They're just going to a much, much smaller class of people that are supporting the regime in the party. And so it's not that, if people are left free, that there's going to be these massive inequities. There's always going to be inequity. But it's the point that the more control you give over a smaller group of people, the more the inequity grows because they don't share. So to David's point, they're going to have AC. And on the eat bugs for your protein, they're going to have nice, juicy steaks.
They're going to fly their private jets.
Exactly.
They're going to keep contaminating the environment. You just won't be able to.
Exactly. And so we mentioned that there was two opinion pieces. So this one was roughly same time of year, almost to the date, July 6th of last year, 2021. CNN published an opinion piece, which this seems to be less opinion and more just reporting on the facts on the ground, which is titled, America's Most Vulnerable Suffer Without AC During Heat Waves. We Can Do Better. Now, again, trying to be fair, that these two opinion pieces seem to be in a contradiction with it. At least if you would ask anybody in CNN and they would say, yeah, I think that what I do on a daily basis is basically targeted at trying to help the vulnerable, trying to help people stay informed so they can make better political decisions and, have a better standard of living, a better quality of life. And
better according to who?
Well, I'm just saying abstractly.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they would say.
But it's better according to their world perspective. Right.
But anybody that works at CNN that would probably agree with that statement about what their motivations are publishes an opinion pieces virtually a year apart from each other saying the vulnerable, we know, right? We can do better. The vulnerable, the most downtrodden in our society are the ones that suffer the most without AC. And then the very next year, pumps an article says, y'all got too much AC. And to David's point, okay, if we have too much AC, who's going to get what we have left when they reduce it? It ain't going to be the most vulnerable.
Nope.
So
never is.
No.
But it's almost like they don't remember the words that they said yesterday. And then they say new words today.
Yeah.
And that's how they've always felt.
Yeah. And the last point, not the last point, the main point, the reason why this is in the Culture Corner segment of getting the culture to accept a lower standard of living as they push. So whether it be with the last 2 years that shall not be named and the medical treatment that you were forced to get, they wanted you to accept things like that in exchange for like V-word passports, because if you accept it, maybe we can institute some sort of social credit system in the future where you're all just reduced down to QR codes. Or whether it be in the context of emissions. Can't have steak anymore. Cows fart too much. You're going to eat bugs. Or now with this topic, can't have AC. That you're putting holes in the ozone layer. So now you just got to sweat your balls off.
Theoretically, we've already been
all
bugs.
pushing in the direction of accept a lower standard of living.
Like, remember those like hit piece articles on McDonald's that they were putting like mealworms in their burgers and shit like that?
Yeah, that used to be bad.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's what we're up to now.
Sounds to me like McDonald's was just ahead of the times.
We only use the most quality mealworms in your McDonald's double quarter pounder with cheese.
And not to get too conspiratorial before we move on to the Epstein segment is just ask yourself.
Not to get too conspiratorial before we go on to the conspiratorial.
Yeah. just ask yourselves, right? When you look at the political decisions, when you look at the most powerful people on this earth, whether they be in the United States government or these international organizations, ask yourself, do their policies seem to be in line with the direction the culture is preemptively being pushed, right? If the opinion pieces are telling you to accept a lower standard of living, and then, I don't know, a certain presidential administration goes to war against the energy industry because, again, the same goals of climate change, then when you see you're unable to afford all of the groceries you did before because now you're paying an entire $1 more for gas, or you see the groceries themselves skyrocketing through the roof because...
Or you see less groceries.
Exactly. The shelves are emptier. It almost seems like the policies that are following close behind, and this is not an intentional slip, in goose step with the getting the culture to accept a lower standard of living, it almost seems like they're front running, trying to get us to accept that so that they can do what they already planned on doing anyway. They just don't want us to get too unruly.
They will own nothing and they will enjoy it more.
Exactly. So
won't they, Mr. Bond?
So don't fall for that shit. Call them out when you see it. Any politician that tries to push this shit, especially, call them out in any way, shape, or form you can, even if just in conversation with your family and friends.
How's that private jet, you dickhead?
Because there's an H.L. Mencken quote on this regard that's something to the effect of, the urge to save humanity is almost always a false front for the urge to rule it.
It's almost like the thing that we always say, whatever bill that they enact, whatever words that they say into a mic, they're going to go behind the doors and do the exact opposite of what they're saying they're going to do. Typically.
Right.
Anywho.
So with that being said, we are on to the...
Baby's out of the corner.
We are on to the Epstein didn't kill himself segment. And in this one, as you know, as we always like to do on this segment, the purpose for any new listeners or viewers, the purpose of this segment is it's a satirical...
Firstly, that you don't forget that he didn't. Secondly,
is that just like history will suggest to you that Epstein did in fact not kill himself. And then therefore, when they try to do similar things to other people in the future, that you don't fall for that, just like you didn't fall for Epstein. In a similar vein, the government, whatever catastrophe they are causing today, history did not start yesterday. They generally have a very long history of doing the same or similar things in terms of making your life worse than it otherwise would be absent the action that they took. And so that's what we like to highlight in this section, is just to remember you. Not only is this not the first time that they've done this, but also to give you, the listener and viewer, ammo to take back to your friends and family conversations when somebody tries to just throw out a party line from the establishment. And you can be like, well, actually, they did this in the past, and this is why we should be suspect of them now.
So what are they doing now, Dane?
What they're doing now is, and I almost feel like his name is being overused, but it just
like a boogeyman.
it's so much. Orwell, writing 1984,
okay.
If he were alive today, would be just appalled that people seem to be using it as a guidebook for what to do as opposed to a warning against it.
You remember Nostradamus, how like in 2001, they're like, this is the end times. He predicted 9/11. Like, I feel like Orwell is the new Nostradamus. He's in the zeitgeist now as Nostradamus. Because he's like, this is how they're going to do it. Like, God damn, they did it. And then they're going to do this. Like, oh shit.
So, the topic, the reason why Orwell in 1984 in particular applies here is the whole newspeak, the whole idea of reclassifying things, giving them new definitions so that they don't mean what they previously meant. And the issue with this is, you've probably seen this because this was all over mainstream media, is the White House publishing, I don't know, a report or a statement or whatever, anticipating, which by the way, in case you didn't know, on Thursday, we got the second quarter GDP results, which classically speaking, or at least let me put it this way, every single time this has happened since World War II,
we've called it this.
Where there was...
And it's funny you bring up World War II. We'll track back to that later. Go ahead.
Or the standard definition of a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. In the first quarter of this year, we had negative GDP growth. And the new data that just came out on Thursday, July 27th or 6th, also indicated negative GDP growth. So according to the definition used since World War II, for every time this has happened, we are in a recession. But the White House on Monday or Tuesday of this week front ran that and said, oh, well, you might have heard, citizen, that a recession is when you have 2 negative quarters in a row of negative GDP growth. But that's not what a recession is. It's a lot of these other things, these other factors that suggest that, we're not in a recession.
It's not the thing that we devised a word that basically had the exact same definition that we use that word to define what it is to this day. But now that we don't like it, it's not that word anymore. If only there was something else right around World War II that they had changed that would like draw conclusions like that it had bad outcomes. Oh, wait. They used to call it shell shock.
Yes.
And they used to call it shell shock for a reason, because motherfuckers were messed up when they came back from World War II. And guess what they got? They got care. We took care of them when they came home, if they came home. Trickle on down the road, what do they call it today? PTSD. What? That's just numbers. That's just letters. I mean, it stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. But what's the problem nowadays? We can't, which is the main topic of today, we can parlay it into it, is that we aren't taking care of our vets. So it does matter. Words matter. Words absolutely matter. When you start saying, well, we don't like this so much because it makes us look, it's liar, liar. Your Honor, I object. And why is that, Mr. Reed? Because this is devastating to my case. Overruled. Good call. Like, no shit.
And the PTSD point is a really good thing, because think about the changes in those two terms. Shell-shocked indicates to you that the trauma that's causing the issue is at least closely related to war,
combat.
Right? Yeah. And who's the one who sends people to war? The government. But if you call it PTSD and you say, well, they got PTSD from a war setting, but other people can have PTSD from, a car accident, a loss of a family member, yada, 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 then we can kind of conflate it and we can it's just general trauma. The government's not responsible for PTSD. If you dig into the details a little bit and find out, well, this is a war veteran and that the reason they have PTSD is because of classical shell shock, but we don't call it that anymore, right? Because we're just kind of blurring the lines so that you don't ever get the idea that the government is ever responsible for causing anybody any trauma ever, unless they deserve it because they're racist white supremacists for going to the gym and caring about their fitness.
Or if they misrepresent
then it's cool.
Your sexuality or identity or don't want to LARP with you.
Yeah. And so that's a very good point about the interesting name change. And another point that David and I bring up all the time, this isn't necessarily, it is history, but it's also all the way up to the present day. About every single time they have a catchy little phrase for a bill that passes, you can always assure that the opposite is true. Patriot Act ain't patriotic. CARES Act doesn't care about you, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, those things do the opposite. Unpatriotically infringe your Fourth Amendment rights, or basically use you as a slush fund for all of their crony-connected buddies to launder money so that they can get a whole bunch while you just get a $1,400 paycheck. The point of all of that is that whether it's in that sector or it's in the military or it's in any other aspect of your life which government sticks its grubby little fingers, the point is when they screw up, they just change the words. Because it's not their fault. And, like we said on the beginning of the jump in, wouldn't that be great if as kids we could do that with our report cards? I didn't fail, Mom. I did fantastic. Like, government is the only institution for which people will go to the fucking barricades. And in this, I mean people who support Biden, because they don't want the egg on their face that they made a poor decision. They will go to the barricades defending this statement saying, we might be in a recession, but it's not a recession because we've changed the definition.
If you don't call it a recession, it's not a recession. Jesus Christ.
Exactly. So
you can call that shark not a shark, seeing as we just got done with Shark Week. You can call him not a shark. He's a big smiley. He's a fish with teeth. He's a fish with teeth. He's still gonna bite you in half. It doesn't matter. You can call him a silly goose, and he's still gonna bite you in half. It doesn't matter what the fuck. It is what it is.
So, that's the Epstein moment is when they screw up, they change the definitions to try to at least, I don't know, make you, it's like a little cat with a laser, like, oh, look over here.
Or they remind you that you're a piece of shit in your AC with your food, you fucks.
So with that being said, I think we're ready for the main topic, which again, piggybacks within the themes going on with the first two.
It's like we did this on purpose or some shit.
Yeah, it's like, we spend hours upon hours planning the show notes page for you to find at wdpodcast.com/105.
Ooh, heartless.
I know,
heartless
right?
Plug.
I didn't ask for money. I'm going to do that at the end.
Yeah. You dirty bitch.
The main topic is the quote unquote, well, not quote unquote, it's called the PACT Act, PACT-ACT. But we're not gonna do that the rest of the episode because it's clearly gonna tongue tie David. But you may have seen a big dust up between, many people, because obviously it's down the political
been all
lines.
over the place.
But Jon Stewart is really taking up the mantle to say, and here's what we're gonna do for this topic, is we're gonna give you basically the arguments from both sides, but explain to you why, if you fully imbibe one or the other side, you're going to miss the main focal point. And that's what we're here to give you. That's why we destroy both sides' memes, to give you the truth. So anyway, Jon Stewart is really, I'm not scapegoating because, they voted how they voted. He's basically exclusively blaming the GOP for nuking the PACT Act, which the ostensible purpose of the act is, again, keeping in mind that the acts don't do what they say they do, is to help fund the healthcare for veterans, specifically veterans that were exposed to burn pits, where they burn their trash, their sewage, all kinds of stuff.
They burned everything in those.
Over in different theaters of war, Iraq, Afghanistan, et cetera, et cetera. And the specifically the military members that were exposed to that have had a lot of lung-related, you can imagine, right? Burning all those chemicals and that toxic,
They
mixture.
burn batteries, Dane.
Yeah, being around that exposes you to a lot of carcinogens, which is causing lung cancer, it's causing autoimmune diseases, it's causing all kinds of issues. And that's what the stated purpose of the bill is. Now, Jon Stewart says the GOP nuked it because they hate veterans. I guess that's their only motivation. The GOP says we were good with this bill until a Democratic representative at the 11th hour attached an addendum to it, which basically has the money flowing everywhere except to the veterans themselves. Now, those are the claims of both sides. For his part, Jon Stewart says that addendum is just how the bill is funded. The GOP says it creates a slush fund that has no accountability. And so Democrats can basically pull from it whatever they want and send it to anywhere but the veterans. That's what both sides are saying about it. And we're going to link to articles and you can read them and make up your own mind about who's being disingenuous or honest or whatever about their motivations. But David and I have different thoughts.
Slightly. I don't want to, draw this out too much. But again, it's to say that one side doesn't care more than the other is not. It's always disingenuous. They don't see. He had a good point too. I mean, I saw a lot of his rant. He's like, they live in their ivory tower up there. They do not live down here with us. And that's basically that's the running theme for this whole episode and really this whole podcast is that they just don't care. Like it could literally be, I mean, unless it affected them, I'm sure, like it affected Pelosi's pocketbook this week when she made all that money, or not this week, but when she keeps out hedge funding the hedge funds.
Well, to be fair, I mean, her husband runs a hedge fund.
Well, I mean,
but I'm just saying,
probably the most lucrative hedge fund ever, right? Or does he not pass those? Does he not pass his genius onto the hedge fund?
No, not ever. I mean,
it's just his personal hedge fund that he's a genius in.
They're doing quite well, we'll say. But so whether or not you come to the conclusion that Jon Stewart is right and it's exclusively the fault of the GOP, or you come to the conclusion that the Republican representatives that have said, hey, these Democrats over here aren't playing fair ball because we were ready to agree to this thing before they put in this slush fund provision, regardless of who you come out believing or thinking is in the right on that, when you look into the details yourself, what's being missed when you focus on when you pick the sides, which again, this is what they want you to do. They want you to pick your tribe, don't listen to any nuance, and definitely whatever you do, don't look behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
Don't see that the emperor has no clothes. Because here's the thing, and this is a point that we've made up, but not on a crystal clear point like this, but a point that David and I have talked about a lot in the past, is that government never misses an opportunity to exploit a disaster or a catastrophe, or in this case, a very sad outcome of the wars, by the way, that they sent these veterans to get sick from in the first place. Government is now going to tug at your heartstrings with the help of Jon Stewart, or if you're on the GOP side, with the help of those representatives, tug at your heartstrings to basically say that one of these two sides is to blame and not the apparatus of government as a whole.
Don't forget that we need to tack onto that government loves, I tripped over that word. Government loves a catchy phrase. We support our troops. Don't you support our troops? Like, yeah, we do. But that's why we're questioning whether or not we should have been in that war for 20 years.
Yeah.
Because why are we're supporting our troops by questioning why you're sending them there to get blown up. But they're really quick to say, well, to even question the war is to not support the troops. But then the troops come home and they forget all about them. So it seems like they're too busy telling you that you're not supporting the troops by listening to their garbage, but then they're literally not supporting the troops by getting them blown up, giving them medical problems that they're going to have for the rest of their lives, and then not supporting them when they're the apparatus that gave it to them, literally.
Yeah. government be like, we love our troops so much, we're going to make up a reason to go to send them over into a foreign country to be exposed to burn pits in the first place so that we can put more money in the pockets of Boeing and Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and General Dynamics, and you just name the whole lot of them. That's how much they love and support the troops. So the thing that I would say to Jon Stewart is, first of all, the broad point of just because the bill says that this is what it's for, that's not what it's always going to do. That should be obvious. That
he should know that.
That doesn't even pass the laugh test if you then, before you went to the laugh test, put it through the eyeball test of just what happened in your own lifetime. We're not asking you to study ancient history to realize that this is the way government operates. We're asking Jon Stewart, who's at least twice as old as us, I think he's in his 60s, right?
Who used to run a news broadcast show
we're
on
saying,
Comedy Central.
In 60 years, in your 60 years roughly of experience, you haven't seen this happen again and again and again, where something gets passed for the purposes of helping but always ends up hurting, or if not hurting, just sending the money into crony directions as opposed to the intended actual recipient. Is we'd say that first about Jon, but then, the other thing we would say to Jon is like, listen, man, you have to realize that this is the only institution in society, whether or not you think government is morally justified to even pass bills like this in the first place. Well, first of all, to send the kids to war, and second of all, to take money to fund their healthcare once they're injured. Whether or not wherever you come out on that conclusion, the point is that government is getting to do this carte blanche, and you and I would be thrown in a cage for it. If we sent somebody to go to somebody else's house and kill them, just one person, not even talking about bombing entire wedding parties of innocent women and children. If we send a guy to go kill another guy, we're going to jail for murder. If we take somebody up in a plane, and then when we're up there, not telling them we're going to do this ahead of time, no parachute, push them out the plane, right? Synonymous to sending them to war that then they get, lung cancer from. Push them out the plane. What are we going to be? Murderers.
And you know what? That guy probably said, "Hey, shouldn't I have a parachute?" "Nah, you're fine. Support the plane. Support our troops. Why are you questioning me? Just get in the plane with that very slippery surface right over there. And I'm going to ask you about a banana. I'm going to ask you to hand me something over there. Don't question me. How dare you?" And I know best.
Oh, yes, the government always knows best. But on that point about never missing an opportunity for a disaster, let's just be very clear about this. The kids being sent over there in the first place and then getting the issues from the burn pits that this bill is aimed at supposedly helping. These kids, we can all agree, are victims of a machine that chewed them up, spit them out, and doesn't care about them now. And now, some part of the regime allegedly wants to put a Band-Aid on that issue that regime caused, and then say that the other half of the regime is bad because they don't support it. Now, whether or not the amendment added to the end is what turned the GOP off from it, and not just because they hate veterans, as Jon Stewart would have you believe, as if there's no other motivation at all. They simply hate the veterans. That's it. End of story. A simple conclusion for why you can just always know that they're the ones in the wrong. Is the way the bill being funded, whether it was in there before or after the vote, is kind of irrelevant, because if it's a slush fund and there's not tight constrictions on where the money goes to who it's going to help, what's going to happen to that money? What happened with all the COVID relief money, which
it went exactly
at David and I's
where
last
it was
count,
supposed to go? Definitely wasn't mishandled. Nothing ever is with the government.
$500 billion of that is never going to be accounted for from the CARES Act stuff.
Because
and in climbing.
If you don't write down the exact amount of money you made the year before and you tell the IRS the wrong number, they will track you down. They will figure out the number that you actually made, and they will expect you to be paying that. But they do it, and it's just like, what? Okay, what, you wanted us to be able to control where every little dollar went? Well, maybe not every little dollar, but $26.2 billion going to an orange fucking grove in Ohio. Maybe it could have stopped that one. And that's what would have happened this. And I don't want it to be lost on it. Like you said, this pre-roll, but it basically boils down to every issue in American, we are just bargaining chips. That's what all this is. It's just like whatever tragedy is going on, they look at it and they go, how could this possibly benefit me or my constituents? And they act accordingly.
Right.
They never have our interest in mind. Bear that in mind.
And here's how you cut through the noise of Jon Stewart yelling at Ted Cruz, on opposite sides of this issue, is focus on the victims, right? The victims are the soldiers here. They're the ones that were victimized and are now trying to be helped. But I want you to take a step back and not just say, okay, here's where we are today and only one side is proposing this or not, is think about those wars that we went to. And David and I have talked about this on the podcast. What was the vote for the Patriot Act and for, authorizing the war on terror and all that kind of stuff? There was only one or two. There was a very small handful of objectors that didn't support that. It was bipartisanship across the board, Republicans and Democrats alike, that said, yep, send them over there to get lung cancer from burn pits. Send them over there to die. So that bipartisanship, which led to that conclusion, is now cynically, and this is what's most disgusting about it, is the victims are simply used as pawns. Just like our grandfather was for Vietnam, the victims are being used as pawns. The reason why the Democratic congressman who could, again, if you believe the GOP, was able to put the addendum on at the 11th hour to get some pork back to his district or whatever, the reason why he knew he could do that is because the victims are going to be his ploy when his thing gets nuked for what he wanted to do, attaching that addendum. He can go to you and say, oh, but don't you care about those poor sick veterans that I helped make poor and sick with my previous votes? That's disgusting. And then on the other side of it, if you take Jon Stewart at face value, and the GOP are just a bunch of evil veteran haters, and the only reason why they nuke this thing is because they don't want money going to veterans. They would rather having it go to, who knows, nameless, faceless corporation, yada, yada, yada. If you believe that side of the narrative, then the GOP is, again, using the same pawns that the people on the left are trying to use to say, oh no, we just nuke this thing because we want to make sure that the aid actually goes to the soldiers themselves.
And what happens in the end, Dane?
Either case, the victims are being victimized again.
Their plight goes unheard and unresolved. With all this bickering, with all this back and forth, excuse me, the people that need the help always get left out in the cold. And they don't give a fuck. They go home to their AC. They go home to their private jets. They go home to their meat steaks, not mosquito burgers. Like that, again, I don't know. And I even heard this week that like they're still talking about Trump. They're still worried about Trump. They're saying like this is how disengaged they are. They think people are moving over, Republicans are moving over into Democratic camps because of what Trump is doing today, because he had Saudi Arabian, who knows what the fuck, people at one of his golf courses. I was like, that's why? President Bush flew fucking the members of Osama bin Laden's family out of this country the day after 9/11. What the fuck do you think is going on?
Biden was just over there last week, literally fist bumping the crown prince and begging for them to have some more, open up the oil to increase the production and stuff like that.
It's like, how? Stop drinking the Kool-Aid. Stop. It's not good for you. It's lead based. God damn.
It belongs in an Iraqi burn pit.
Remember things longer than 5 seconds. Is that our call to action this week? Please remember things that happened longer than 5 seconds ago, America. Like, know your history before you just start blathering on about, well, Trump, and he was only 50 miles away from New York. You believe that? So no Saudi Arabians should ever be even close to New York ever again, you fucking racist, by the way? Coming from the party that's claiming that everything is racist and sexualized and... I can't anymore. I'm going to go to my happy place. I'm going to go over my culture corner and just sit.
To end this segment for me, the key takeaway from this entire exchange is the cynical use of the victims to play, horse trading in DC, is that, as we said, the motivator underneath this whole thing is government always saying, never let a disaster or catastrophe go to waste. And as we always talk about incentives on this here podcast, if the incentive is to have disasters on which to expand your power or give yourself a reason to have more money or whatever the case may be, if disasters are the reason for you to make those arguments,
then you want more disasters, don't you?
it sounds like you want more disasters.
It sounds like you're kind of... It sounds like disasters are that guy that your girlfriend tells you not to worry about. With the big muscles over there.
Exactly. So there is no... And again, this is why across party lines, in general, with a few conscientious objectors along the way, like Ron Paul, Thomas Massey, etc., it's pretty bipartisan that when it's time to bang the war drums and go send people over to more burn pits, that's a pretty unanimous vote. And I would say that if we wanted to solve the problems of vets with lung cancer, we might want to start with not sending them over there to get it in the first place, instead of just trying to put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound and say, oh, we're going to give them some money from this unaccountable slush fund for their health care for the rest of their days until they die a miserable, painful death from what we caused them.
From us, or far be it from us to call that supporting the troops instead of sending them over there to get blown up.
Exactly.
But with that being said, with the cheery note, Dane, where can they find this podcast?
They can find this episode at wmdpodcast.com/105. They can find the podcast itself, audio only, on any podcast platform. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. And they can find the video on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. They can link up with us on our other socials, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. TikTok does include every once in a while some smaller clips from these episodes. But if you want the full episodes, go to your video platforms, your podcast catchers, or the website itself. On that note, with the website itself, I did have a pitch, if you'll indulge me, that I've been wanting to make for a couple weeks. And
don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.
And I'm just going to say that if this appeals to you, this is something that you can do at wmdpodcast.com, the support our work tab, and you can do just a one-time donation if you want to do it. We will keep track of names and stuff like that who do that, because we want to offer you something in exchange for your support.
Just like AOC.
There is a summit coming up in Miami, Florida, where we live, in a few, I think October or something like that. Liberty Fest or something like that. It would probably help if I knew the name of the thing.
That's a good idea. We'll have the name of the thing on
anyway
the website.
David and I would like to attend this, not only for the opportunity to just kind of grow our audience within the Liberty community, but to have a booth there to interview some of the guests and bring those to you on this podcast. To get the lowest level of the booth at that event, it's $700. But, and here's something for you if you would like to participate in helping us accomplish that goal, is we get 5 free tickets to the event. So David and I, our video guy, will come, and we have 2 other tickets available to anybody that supports and contributes to help us get to that $700 goal before then, so we can purchase a booth to be there, like I said, not only to network with the broader Liberty community, but to hopefully bring you content, as we did with the Solutionary Summit, some of those on-site interviews, bring that as additional content to you, the podcast listeners, who are our friends, our brothers in arms, in terms of growing this thing as big as we can to hopefully inject a little sanity into this crazy world.
Are you done begging for money?
Yes. I'm done groveling.
So next week on As the World Burns, or As America Burns, it's getting real hard to stay positive around here. But anyway.
Feel free to sign us out whenever you're ready, David. Ignore my laughter.
Okay. Shit, I even forgot my own tagline.
You forgot your line.
Oh, stay safe, but more importantly, stay free.